Hello everybody, welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which will see Venom 3, Venom The Last Dance, That's right, it's coming everybody, and this is expected to be what? The worst opening in the franchise's history. That's right, looking at almost $30+ million less than the previous two Venom films, which both opened in the $90 million range, especially when you adjust those numbers for inflation. With how ticket prices have changed, this is going to ultimately make it the worst opening in the franchise's history. And that's not a good sign. The one positive that really is going on for the film is the fact that Sony does not spend as much money on these Venom films as they do on a lot of their other projects, and especially not nearly as much as what Disney pays for their superhero fare. Obviously, Disney's spending $200+ million on most of their movies, whereas the Venom films fall typically in the $100+ million range, which is a lot better, but still quite a bit of money and still needs to make quite a bit of money to actually break even. We'll also talk today about the second weekend drop-off being projected right now for Smile 2. Seems like it's going to hold pretty well, and also other films like The Wild Robot continuing to hold on, even though there are some people that just do not understand and do not accept the fact that the film is holding well enough to be a chart breaker, to be doing better than what vast majority of films tend to do after their first 2 weeks of release, and has a very good chance of making its money back and making some profits. We'll talk about that, and also the new film Conclave, which I have now no interest in seeing because the ending was spoiled for me, and I'm glad that it was, because oh boy, that's just stupid. Let's go ahead and just start off with these numbers here with Venom 3. First, $55.9 million is what's currently being reported by Box Office Theory. If we jump over to what the projections are from Box Office Pro, they are projecting it to be between $60 and $80 million. So Box Office Pro seems to be giving this film a little bit more leeway here, a little bit more of a positive spin, at least a little bit more potentiality for this movie. Whether or not it gets to the $60-80 million range or not is, still remaining to be seen. What I do think is if I had to go with either one of these, I'd probably go more so with Box Office Theory on this one, only because Box Office Theory tends to do a lot of these more long-term forecasting, long-term tracking, and what I have seen consistently as the trackings have been updated, is that Venom, at one point in time on Box Office Theory, was being projected to be anywhere from $80 to $95+ million in its domestic opening. So the fact that the last couple weeks we've really seen that number drop quite a bit, with the most recent week being updated, being probably the biggest and most drastic of the drops, where finally it was in the $60 million range. I really can't say I'm that surprised to see the numbers as they are. Now, some early reactions from people who have seen the film already or have been, coming out of the opening night films and opening night screenings of the film have been a bit mixed, just like what we've seen with the previous movies. It sounds like if you like the previous Venom films, you will like this movie, whereas if you did not care for or even hated the previous Venom films, you'll probably feel the same about them as well. I've seen Venom 1 and Venom 2, haven't been the biggest fan of them. Venom 2 is just a bit of a mess in so many ways. I mean, they all are, but especially Venom 2. And that was a movie that it was so bad that it was fun for me, at least, and I could see other people in the theater that I went to at that time when that film came out also having some fun too. So clearly this does appeal to some people, but if the number that's being projected right now by Box Office Theory, or even the number being projected over on Box Office Pro, if these numbers hold, danger Will Robinson for the future prospects of this specific film. Staying over on Box Office Pro, they project the second film, the number 2 film this weekend, will be Smile 2, taking another $15-18 million. The Wild Robot taking the number 3 spot at $6-8 million. Now, what is interesting is that they are now, of course, projecting that Terrifier 3 will be dropping out of the top 3 spots, and so that will definitely be something that we will have to continue to follow, especially as right now is expected, according to Box Office Theory at least, to be coming in just underneath the now new film Conclave, set to be released. Honestly, 6.7 million, at least to me, seems a bit on the high end for a film coming out at only 1,700 screens. I do think that the marketing campaign for the film has been very effective. It has a very good cast. The trailer, I think, has done its job in trying to build the intrigue for it, but it's got a couple of problems going on with it. For one, it is a film that is obviously focused on the Catholic Church, and there's not a lot of people that want to go see films featuring the Catholic Church. Especially when it comes to this specific movie, right? You would think Catholics would be wanting to see a film that's rooted in the church. The problem is that most Catholics are going to know what the twist is in the movie, and once they know what the twist is in the movie, they'll say, yeah, I'm not giving my money to that nonsense. And so it's going to be interesting to see, right, whether there is the anti-Catholic audience that might want to go see it knowing what the twist might be, or whatever the mindset might be for the people that are going to try to go. Ultimately, 6.7 sounds a little bit on the high end for me, and I do think that it is worth noting that Box Office Pro does not even have Conclave in their top 3 projections, though we know that there are many times when Box Office Pro and Box Office Theory disagree. Now, we don't have the numbers yet as of the recording of this video of the Box Office Reports update that usually comes out sometime between tonight and tomorrow morning, but my guess would be, as in the past, they've been much more in line with Box Office Theory. Probably will have Conclave in the top 5 spots, but it'll be interesting to see just how much more. If I had to guess, I could see it more so coming in the 5 million plus range personally. But again, that still remains to be seen. But if it is able to come in underneath that number, and Terrifier 3 is able to hold a 34% hold, again, for a non-rated movie like this one to still be holding as well as it is, it's truly incredible to see these numbers for the film. And again, kudos to everyone involved, because they are continuing to do a great job in keeping this film relevant in the different discussions. But if it's able to beat a film like Conclave, after everything, again, what I know about the fact about what the end of the movie is, that would definitely make me happy just on a small moral victory level. Beetlejuice still hanging around as well, dropping 30% there. We Live in Time dropping 19% from A24. Piece by Piece still hanging around. Transformers 1 hanging around, and Saturday Night hanging around as well. And as I mentioned with Box Office Pro, they've got the Venom film, Smile 2, and The Wild Robot at $6 to $8 million for The Wild Robot. If we go over just to dive further into just how bad these Venom numbers could potentially be, let's go ahead and talk about the franchise, okay? So ultimately, this is the Numbers.com's franchise for the Sony Marvel universe, and so that's why it includes films like Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, as well as many of the other ones mentioned here. So again, take that ordering and grouping of films with a grain of salt. But the first Venom film, when you adjust these numbers for inflation and based on the reports that we have, actually, no, sorry, this one actually is just the general reporting. So the first film cost a little bit over $100 million, around $116 million. The second film ended up costing around $110 million, so they spent just about the same amount of money on that film as they have on Venom: Last Dance. When you adjust for inflation, we know that this number is actually a little bit higher, and so this might be actually on paper the cheapest and the least amount they've spent on a movie. But these opening weekends are, I think, the ones that are the most interesting to me. In the opening weekend for Venom, the first film, it was $80.2 million, whereas for the second film, it was $90 million. And so on paper, it would seem like, okay, that's a $10 million increase. That's pretty good. Well, when you put the comparisons up and actually do some adjustments for inflation, as you can see, Venom: Let There Be Carnage did still make more than the first Venom film, but not by much. $95.4 million versus $94.9 million, and this is not even looking at comparing those the ticket sales, right, and the average ticket price that has changed, that changed quite drastically between 2018 and 2021. We're talking about 2018 maybe have an average ticket price in the $10 to $12 range, whereas now it's much closer to $14. You then also take into account how much bigger the Venom film, the first Venom film, was internationally. It made over $1 billion when you actually adjust for inflation, whereas the second film was just barely able to get $300 million. Now, one could argue, hey, that was pretty close to COVID, and so there were many countries that were still impacted. You know, that very well could be the case. But I do think that there is enough out there for us to suspect that if the numbers come in as low as it is, right? Again, this film right now with Venom 3 projected to come in at $55.9 million, so about $30 million less than the last movie, the last two films, when you take those numbers and adjust them. Yeah, that's definitely not a good thing. When you are already down about 30% compared to your other previous projects, that's not a good thing, because if you make 30% less than the last project that you made, if that number holds out in the domestic market, if that number also holds out even internationally as well, yeah, that means ultimately you're hovering the line of your break even, right? So most films tend to need to make about 2.5 to 3 times their budget, more closer to 3 times their budget. Depends on how much money they make in what markets they make, right? They get 55% typically of the domestic box office back, 40% of the international, not counting China. So if this film is making a lot more money internationally, if this film is making a lot of money in China, if this film is making a lot of money in certain markets, right, wherever it might be released, I have not looked into the full country breakdown for this new movie, but that is ultimately going to determine how much money it needs to make in different markets, and ultimately how much money it will make or lose. If I had to guess, I would say this film probably has a pretty good chance of breaking even and making some profit. I do think that that's going to happen for this movie, but in a year where a lot of films that have disappointed people have ultimately failed, I wouldn't be surprised if the film ended up failing. Again, I don't think that's going to happen, but again, with this year, it's very hard to see anything else happening there. Going over to the charts, because we love Chauncey on OMB Reviews, as you can see right now, the other reports that I have seen is actually that Venom 3 cost $120 million, so some discrepancy here from the reporting over from box office, the numbers.com versus that's being reported elsewhere. We love to do things in real time here, so as you all know, I tend to use Wikipedia specifically as a source on certain things, but it's also because I check the sources on Wikipedia to make sure that it's coming from a verifiable place. And so let's go ahead and pull up Venom 3, The Last Dance, and let's see what's being reported. $120 million, and where's the source? That's coming from Deadline Hollywood. So again, a pretty reliable source there. I would take that source from Tony over on Deadline. Good old Tony and Nance. Haven't talked about them in quite a long time, probably for good reason, because I just got so tired of their nonsense. But yes, $120 million, no matter which one it is, whether it's 110 or 120 million, yeah, that's still quite a bit of money you need to make back, right? So in a best case scenario, that means you need to make $300 million to break even. In a situation where it's, actually closer to 3 times your budget, we're talking there then about $360+ million in order to break even. And so if it's going to make a lot of its money internationally, that number could actually even go up as far as break-even points are concerned because of how much less they get return on investment in those markets. And yeah, it's definitely going to be an uphill climb for them. I think they'll be able to get there. Opening weekend will tell us quite a bit, though, when it comes to that. When we talk about the film Conclave, this is a smaller budgeted film at $20 million. Needs to make around $50 to $75 million to break even. Opening to between $5 and $6 million domestic. I don't think that looks all that great for the movie, but again, still too early to tell at this point. And so we will continue to follow that here. Now, let's talk about some of the other films. So Smile 2, as I'd mentioned, I do think once these numbers do come in on Sunday and we get the update for the weekend and we get some internationals in, I would not be surprised to see this film at its break-even point, past its break-even, or just barely underneath. We're getting very, very close this weekend. Smile 2 is bound to make profit very, very easily. It's what happens when you have a lower-budgeted horror film that ends up doing a lot better than what anyone would have expected it to. The Apprentice is still a box office flop. Can't say it's happening to a nicer group of people, especially putting a film out like that during the midst of an election cycle. Piece by Piece at $8 million is a movie that is not the biggest flops of the year, but as a documentary, it's not too surprising to see the film not really catching off. I did think that maybe that whole angle with the Legos might be able to help them a bit. Honestly, if you were to look and compare the numbers for that as a documentary versus other documentaries from the past, 10, 15 years, it might actually be towards the higher end. So maybe it did help them, just not nearly enough to make their money back. This is, though, I think a movie that potentially could be sold on different streaming channels. VOD sales could potentially help as well. This is not the biggest of losses that would be impossible to make back some of that money essentially there. But box office wise, it was definitely a flop. Terrifier 3, $20.8 million as of the recording of this video. Let me go ahead and see if I can update these. Sometimes it breaks the, sometimes it unfortunately can break the website because the numbers.com doesn't always like when I do those forced refreshes there. As you can see, some of the numbers may be kind of loading. Nope, there it is, and it's broken. So to try it again, let's see if refreshing will maybe make things a little bit better. And no, I broke it. Unfortunately. But really, the big question or the big thing I want to talk about last was the Wild Robot. So as y'all saw before, the numbers went all wonky and crazy. The Wild Robot was still about $15-20 million in the red, and so there is some speculation as far as will this film actually be able to make its money back. Now, what you would have noticed before these numbers went away is the fact that ultimately this movie was about 50% higher compared to its first 2 weeks. What that means is that this film has already doubled what the first 2 weeks have done. And this film is still out. It is still making money. It is still holding very, very well. So therefore, this weekend, it will officially go underneath 50%, which means it's going to more than have doubled its box office. And again, ultimately, that means what? This movie is a chart breaker. And again, by chart breaker, on my chart, literally on my chart, that's why I call it a chart breaker, and it is still very well pacing to do quite well in the long run, and I think ultimately be able to make its money back theatrically. And remember, this still also has that very weird Japan release in February of next year, so even if the film only barely edges out to like negative $2 million, we could easily say, yeah, it doesn't really matter how much money it makes in Japan. The chances of it making enough to make up that $2 million is probably pretty high. And I've mentioned this before as well, the film is going to make some money on VOD sales. It's already available on VOD, and so I think that it'll be interesting to see what those numbers end up being as these things come in. Let me go ahead and actually see if there is anything up to date. Sometimes the numbers has these things, other times it does not. Let's see, the DEG watched at home. Let's see, it has the week ending 11/2023. So as I said, sometimes they've got things, sometimes they don't, and I don't know what's going on with that. That's just, again, that's why I don't follow streaming numbers, because it's a whole other animal that is a bit beyond me. But getting back to the main thing, what do you think is going to happen with Venom 3? Again, Smile 2 is holding pretty well throughout the week, it seems. Terrifier 3 still in the mix. Wild Robot still in the mix. Again, Wild Robot holding well beyond its means, but also look at how low these numbers are in general, right? We're talking about $182 per screen for the Wild Robot. As I mentioned, it's holding strong, right, in comparison to what it is. But it's still quite far removed from anything else. Joker even doing worse, so it turned $4,000 a day, $71 per theater after 20 days of release. Again, this film's still a catastrophic failure on every single level. But let me know your thoughts about Venom 3. Do you think the film is going to be a hit? Do you think the film is any good? And what do you think is going to be the big surprise of the weekend? I wouldn't be surprised if Terrifier 3 ends up being a much bigger part of this mixture, and wouldn't be surprised if Conclave does a little bit worse than the initial projections seem to be indicating. But let me know your thoughts about that or anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If that's video, smash that like button, love that fire button over on Odyssey, smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day and night, I should say. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribe Star people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And also to the K-Man. Check out his website, xtheboundaries.co. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.